Hey there, what's up? My name's Ryan. In this video, we're going to a new game I just picked up recently called Wayfarers of the South Tigris. Side note, every time I say Tigris, the next person I hear say the word always says Tigris. Then when I switch and say Tigris, the next person always says Tigris. I can't win. Wayfarers is an awesome, epic, big game where you're basically cartographers trying to explore land, trying to explore waters, trying to explore harbors and new cities, and also astronomers trying to explore the sky. And you score a whole bunch of points based on cards you put down in front of you, all the different icons on them, combinations of them, and groups of them in some way. Now, if you want to see the gameplay in its entirety, I've actually done a video on the channel where I played it through on solo mode, so that link will be in the corner in just a second here. But in this video, I'm just going to jump into just a few quick rules and then jump right into some positive and negatives and basically do a review of the game. Now, one of the main things that makes Wayfarers unique is there's kind of two ways you can get most things done. There will be a tableau of cards in front of you, building bigger, bigger, and bigger. And sometimes you'll be acquiring new dice placement spots. And those dice placement spots go into your personal board. Really, it's not really a board, it's just like a whole spread of cards. And they will give you spots to put dice onto. And those actions let you do things like maybe acquire more cards, maybe acquire some influence, maybe acquire some upgrade tiles. But those are your personal spots. They're often a little harder to use, and sometimes they require certain symbols to use those spots, but they're only yours. But there's also around the center board 16 spots that anyone can use and put their workers onto. The spots on the board tend to be a little more powerful, or at least easier to use because there's not the requirement of symbols to go to them. But what's unique is the workers you put out there, they're not yours. Once they're out there, you put them onto a card. Anyone who picks up the card that had to be placed onto now gets that worker to use in the future. So lots of your actions, there's kind of two ways to get about. You have to decide if it's more efficient to use your dice placement spots or pick up new dice placement spots in front of only your board, or to use your workers, which can be a little more powerful, but you can only use them once in a while and throw them out in front of you. On your own player board, there's also a caravan, which basically tells you what you can do with your dice rolls. Beginning of the game, only your ones and your sixes of the dice roll are valuable. You can pick up upgrade tiles though to do things like, okay, I'm going to put a pigeon icon on the 3 space, so now my 3 dice can do this. Or I'm going to pick up this card here that lets me adjust my dice to these numbers here. So as the game goes along, your dice will get much more useful. Then right down the center of the board, there's a giant journal track, and this is something you're going to do when you reset your dice. After you've used all your dice, you place them all or most of your dice, you're going to often rest, and often when you rest, you're going to be able to journal. And journaling doesn't necessarily win you the game to get to the end of the journal track first, but it does trigger the end of the game. It is often a benefit to at least make progress on that track because you get bonuses as you go along. So by journaling, a player might get like a free influence or a free provision or a couple coins. Now, like I said, the cards you acquire are going to be most of your endgame score. Basically, if you get sets of like 5 of one symbol, 5 cities, you're going to get a certain set number of points for that. If you can get 7 cities, you get a lot more points for that. Or if you can get 1 of each of the 4 main symbols, that also gets you points. Basically, different ways to combo cards. Also, the space tiles have just unique ways to gain cards. Like you get a bonus point per planet, or you get bonus points per your yellow upgrade tiles. So a little more unique, a little more specific, you can go for those space tiles. Now, as far as positives go, I typically start with my favorite part of the game. It's not that clear in this game. There's a lot of different directions I can go with this, but I think the thing I love most about this game is all the decisions. Like if you look at the board, this is not a game where you have 3 spots to go to. You're trying to decide which of those 3 are the best actions. You have possibly, I think you start with 6 spots in front of you on your board. And there's also the 16 spots around the board. Like you could put workers onto you. So there's 6 dice placement, there's 16 spots out there. But then when you start the game, there's so many things you can do. Like I love picking up the little villagers because the villagers slide under your cards and make those cards more powerful. So every time you go to your harbor to draw a new blue card, you can slide a villager under there that also gives you a free coin whenever you do that. You could also decide I don't need the free coin, I'm gonna put a villager under there that gives me a discount on the provision it costs to get a new card, so now I can get cards for cheaper. Or you could go a completely different route, just put a card under there that gives you influence. You could go for the ravines, which are more like recurring bonuses throughout the game. You can go for open water cards, which are like big one-time bonuses. You often will need a blend of the strategies, but there are just so many ways you can go. You can play this game and finish it and then realize that, okay, I mostly went for land. I had 1 experience. Land gives you recurring bonuses and a lot of worker placement spots. The next time go for water, which gives you cooler combos and immediate bonuses. Then realize, oh, I haven't really explored the space option yet. Then kind of play the game again and go for space. Or like I said earlier, you can really rush that journal track, or you can choose to really go for the cool combos and not worry too much about the journal track. So what I'm kind of getting at is this isn't just a medium game, but it's definitely on the heavier side of medium. But I really like it because it's not just heavy for the sake of being heavy. There's not just, here's a bunch of extra rules to make your life more complicated, but really rewards you with all these complicated decisions, but there's actually payoff for it. So basically it boils down to like an efficiency engine. So yes, it's worker placement. I love worker placement, but on top of that, it's really about trying to take the most efficient, most valuable actions you can. So what I mean by that is this: you could on turn 1 just take a die, put it on a spot, get 2 provisions. Next turn, goes on the table. Next turn, you put a die here, spend 2 provisions, get a land tile. Next turn, rest. 4th turn, put a guy here, get 2 provisions. Next turn, 5th turn, put a guy here, spend 2 provisions. You could do this the entire game almost, but it's really inefficient. You could gather up some land tiles, but you might look at the board at the beginning of the game and say, you know what, I do want to get a lot of those city land tiles, but there's a worker out there that if I slide it under that card, I could get a 1 discount on provision. So turn 1, I'm actually going to put my worker here and acquire that villager, that townsfolk, and put it under that card. Now I can get 2 provisions. I can go here and spend 1 provision instead of 2, get that land tile. I'm going to something else my other dice. The next turn I don't even have to get the provisions. I already have a provision left over. I can do this quicker. So the game comes down to looking at the board and seeing what ways can I kind of combo things together or make things work so I can do things in the most efficient way possible, take fewer turns, and get more cards acquired. Because the fewer turns it takes you, the more cards you're going to get out before the end of the game. Okay, enough said about that. Another thing I love about the game is the journal track. The length of this game is really open-ended. You could play this with 2 or 3 players, and every player is just sort of focused on trying to get maybe 7 is the max you can get of a symbol, 7 of a couple symbols, really get a bunch of points. You could score maybe close to 100 points if you fill in a whole bunch of the stars. You get a whole bunch of star things out there, give you cool combos. You could do all this stuff. You could also have a player who just wants to journal. If you go to there's 3 different guilds, and the Black Guild allows you to journal twice on your turn. If you kind of count up the next 8 spaces on the journal track and say, this is the route I want to take, you can always double journal when you rest. And you could even go to a spot on the board to let you journal again or spot on your player board. You could rush the end of the game. So the length of the game isn't set. The players are really determining how long of a game they're going to be playing by as if one of them is going to race to the end. You could look at the board and say, I can see a way to get a couple of these cards. I can line up the next 4 spots on the journal track so I can do them all in a row. If you can, maybe you should do that. Maybe every player looks at it and says, you know what, I can't really go that quickly, so we're all going to take a little more time. So really, the speed and the final score of this game really depends on what the players want to do. So player-driven length of game. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the caravan's also really cool because you can do these things like, say, +1. So you could put a plus on your 3, so your 3s can always become 4 if you want to. So you can really decide, again, like I said earlier, all the routes you can go. You can make your caravan, you can put a plus on the 3, so all your 3s become 4. You can put a plus on your 4, so 4s become 5. You can put a plus on your 5, so your 5s become 6s. So you can set your caravan up so you roll 3, it can become a 6 if you want to. You can really hone in on that and make your caravan so good and so powerful. It can do anything you want to. Or you can kind of choose to just not go that route. You can kind of just, kind of pay attention to the caravan, try to get some of your symbols from other means, and focus on other things in the game. So, but the caravan is really satisfying. At the beginning of the game, you roll your 3 dice, and you're just like, I can't do a lot with that. By the end of the game, there's a chance of you doing all sorts of cool stuff with those dice. One last positive I'll mention is with the journal track, and also the fact that you put your workers onto cards on the board. And there's also an influence mechanism where you can put influence on the cards as well, which affect other players. The game is pretty interactive. I think games like this heaviness and complexity, sometimes can boil down to a solo game. I don't feel that when I play this game. I feel like I play this game and have some effect on the other players, and what the players are doing are affecting me, because I might see cards that I really need. So for example, on the journal track, I might really need another library. And so there's only one library out there. I might say, you know what? I don't want to do it this turn, but I want to have to find a way to get that library, because if someone takes that from me, I'm kind of stuck on the journal track. Okay, so now for negatives. I don't have much to say on the negative front, but if you are really sensitive, I suggest you just don't listen to this part, because my biggest negative is this nice little storybook that tells you about the game and, occasionally tells you how to play it. No, it's not a storybook, but it does feel that way sometimes. This is actually the rule book. It is so many pages, 24 pages, and there's information that just isn't in there. So for example, your space tiles have all these cool things on it. This one here says 1+ black upgrade tile, :1. Now maybe that should be obvious what that should mean, but it meant nothing to me. I think one of the big issues was this is the first game of a new trilogy of games, but these same designers have made a trilogy of games And they made a second trilogy of games, all which are pretty popular. There's West Kingdom games and there's North Sea games, or even before that. This is the new one of a new trilogy, and they do things where they steal in a good way. They steal some of their iconography from other games. So you see things like green card. Okay, green card means townfolk. The problem is you need to explain in this rule book what all that means. There's literally lines that just say, well, we're not going to explain this because this will make sense. Then I open them the cards and I'm like, okay, 1 plus black upgrade tile :1. And I'm supposed to know what that means. Kind of does this thing where it says, oh, we're going to tell you this idea or this concept of this. We're going to tell you kind of how the land tiles work. And you sort of read this page about, oh, that's interesting. Or here's how workers are placed. So you read maybe 2 or 4 pages of how workers are placed. And you're like, okay, but it doesn't just say clearly, on your turn, do this with a worker. They may go in these spots. You sort of are reading through all this text. I give you, again, I don't mind the concept idea. I like when I teach games, you do this times, right? You say, hey, here's some of the concepts around here. But we also need a really clear summary of what we're supposed to do, especially a game of this complexity. So I thought the rulebook was pretty bad. I didn't think it was great. I thought there is some icons on the back, and they even say these will be explained in the back, but they're not. They're not all here. Not all the icons are here. Maybe you were supposed to study the other games and know them well, bring out the knowledge into here, but I feel like this rule book should make you feel confident, especially considering it's 24 pages. But it's even hard to find things like, here's a really clear-cut turn summary. Like, do these things on your turn in this order. It's more like, oh yeah, on this page here, you'll kind of see us talk about the idea of those. Anyways, I could talk about more, I could complain about. It kind of frustrates me that game this good, this well made, this design, just didn't seem to have a very clear rule book. I think, again, if you knew the other games, it wouldn't bother you as much. If you don't, you're going to be a little lost at first and requiring a little Googling to figure out what to do in the game. There's some things that are kind of counterintuitive as far as like, okay, so the tiles closest to you are free once you've paid the cost on a card. If you paid the cost on your player board, they're free to pick up. The townsfolk, they have a price on the townsfolk themselves. And the space cards, they have a price listed below them that are set by the board. That's pretty counterintuitive. Things like that, I mean, maybe it's necessary. It does make the game more satisfying once you know it. Part of the complexity of the game is it's interesting how the longer the space have been out there, they slide down, get cheaper. But the townsfolk have a set price. So at price 3 townsfolk is always going to be price 3. Then the tiles in front of you, like the land and water tiles, they just are free once you can pay the cost on your board. That's all interesting, just makes it a hard teach. Okay, so as far as recommendations, rulebook stuff aside, I love this game. I think it's awesome. I think they designed a medium to heavy game, but it has a really good smooth flow to it once you get into the game. Now, I will warn you, if you're not up for a more heavier game, if you've never played anything on the heavy complexity side, it is a jump. It is a jump in complexity. And the first time through the game, you'll be pretty lost. They actually even recommend it the first time through the game, you really focus on the journal track so you can kind of see what you're doing. Because the first time you play the game, you will be pretty lost probably, especially if you're not used to this complexity. So my recommendation would be, if you like medium heavy, especially like, Euro style, you're trying to manage your stuff, manage workers, manage your dice, it's really interesting. There's so many fascinating decisions. Like turn 1, like I've already described, there's the dice route, there's the space route, there's the get a lot of tokens route, there's the townsfolk. You can ignore any of those things, but all those different routes you can take the victory. You can just choose all of them. You can choose a not journal, you can choose 2 journals. So all those decisions make this just for a fascinating game. If you're up for that, I think it's a great one. I think also, I didn't want to talk about earlier, but the tie in the theme is so interesting. This game has like a legit theme to it. Like, you're exploring. When you journal, you've like reached the end of your journey, you're coming back to rest, and you get to like reset your dice. You meet townsfolk. The townsfolk, if you meet a townsfolk in a city and you like are their friends, they will help you, if you activate or go to that city again. So it has a nice theme. As you already can probably tell, it looks really good. It has this great, as you build up your exploration, you get the planets and stars in front of you and all this stuff spread out. It looks really good on the table. It has a lot going for it. So anyways, that is Wayfarers game that I have loved playing. I think if you like heavy games, you will like playing as well. And just be aware, if you haven't played heavy games before, if you're like, typical game is more like Sushi Go or something, this is going to be a considerable jump up. There's a lot going on in this game, but I think it's awesome. If you enjoyed the video, of course, hitting the like button down below Really helps the channel out. As I mentioned, I did a solo playthrough, so if you want to see that, that'll pop up here in the corner in just a second. And also, if you want to subscribe to the channel to see a lot more reviews like this, and also solo playthroughs and group playthroughs. See ya.